Okay, this is going to be probably one of the most fun scenes for us to light, and the reason being is that the lighting will at first seem to defy convention, you know, why we put certain lights in certain places and why we did certain things, but we did use a very advanced light gag that we'll show you that I've been using for years to make certain atmospheres, but you can use it to your discretion at this point. Just probably don't overuse it because then it kind of doesn't really mean very much. Only use it for certain situations where you're trying to elicit this kind of a movement of the sun. We're going to go ahead and mimic the rising of the sun, which normally the rising of the sun wouldn't actually just dim up. It would actually rise up and change the shadows as the sun rises in the horizon. But sometimes when it just peaks over a mountain and the shadows don't really change very much, the light just kind of changes and gets brighter and brighter. And that's the kind of lighting we're going to be doing here. And we're also going to show you how to be able to see into the room right before the sun rises without having to make major lighting changes. So let's first listen to Jake talking about his character. So what are you going to be doing now?
Well, I'm at the point where I've learned how to write and let the mind, the conscious go so that the subconscious comes up, and this will all show that transition of time and space and the zone happening.
And you got to understand the actor wasn't just being silly here. He really believes in this role and he believes in what he's saying. He's putting himself in the right state of mind for the next scene. And here's also the DP talking about undercranking the camera.
To undercrank means to shoot at a slower frame rate and play at a faster. So you'd be shooting 12 for 24.
Oh, okay, cool.
As opposed to 24 for 24, which would be normal, or 48 for 24. But
okay. It allows you to shoot at a lower frame rate so that when you play back at normal speed, everything seems to be going a lot faster. Normally it's being used for comedy, but in this particular case we're using it to elicit the rising of the sun. You can also overcrank the camera, which means shooting at 48 frames per second instead of 24. When you play back at 24, it seems like it's playing at half speed or slow motion. Instrument on the left right here. Okay, we're rolling. And just go ahead and adjust it on him. And kind of in and out, you know. So remember when I told you that the 650 watt ARRI light is going to be the workhorse of the set? There it is again, bouncing off of a soft gold reflector panel, and it's being bounced back into Jake's face. Keep it, go all the way out, and then back in. There you go. So that is acting as the sun. That is acting as the key for the actor in this particular circumstance. It's being sourced as if it's coming from that window, which we've already established that the sun will come through that window at certain times of the day when he's writing. Now, next is going to be the fill. We're going to watch the DP. He's going to be adding a full CTB, color temperature blue gel on there. And what that's going to do is going to tint the fill light that's on the right side of the frame so that it would feel like it's nighttime light, so to speak, which in our minds, for some reason, as movies go, we've been accustomed to feeling that blue light, very soft, dim blue light inside of a room, is nighttime light or moonlight inside of a room, even though moonlight's actually white, but we show it as being blue. This is going to be full blue. Going on the fill light. Okay, so now the DP is going to be adding a thinner material of diffusion onto the chimera. Okay, so now that we've labeled this light as being the fill light, because we know it's actually flooding the room with the light, there's a light path that is going to be generating, and it's going to be actually hitting Jake on the right side of his body, and it's going to be kind of raking the room with nice even light, you know, but also it still feels like it's coming from one side. So this blue toned light is what's going to be there before we turn on this left side light, the one that's shining through the reflector. This blue tone light is going to give us a very low level light that when the actual 650 watt being bounced through the reflector comes on, we're going to practically not see that blue light anymore at all. Notice that the amount of light that's in the room right now, it's very, very dark. So it feels like it's nighttime light, and you just kind of go with your gut feeling on that. And there's our dimmer. Notice that it says 1000 watts max. This is a homemade dimmer that can dim up to a 1K or 1000 watt, which is more than enough for our 650 watt tungsten ARRI, which is this one in particular right here. And watch it kind of dimming up right now. It's going to start going up, and as it goes up, it makes that shadow on the right wall and also lights up Jake. So you can see exactly what it's doing with the reflector and how much space it's occupying of that reflector. which feels like it's actually a rising sun. And there it is starting right there. This is just during the rehearsal, of course. And it gets brighter and brighter. Now we also noticed that we just weren't getting it orange enough. You know, it just didn't feel like a sun still. So what we did is we switched the sides of the reflector to the gold side. This was before the soft gold. Now we flipped it over to the actual full gold side. The soft gold is kind of intermixed silver and gold, whereas the actual full gold is just nothing but a gold reflector. So the best marriage that we found between those two lights is to actually use the Warm Card's Warm 3 card, and we went with that white balance. Another little trick that I used is to put an orange CTO gel on there, color temperature orange, full orange gel. I put it on top of the reflector, on top of the gold reflector, so that it creates highlights on the back wall. Notice what happens when I go ahead and tap that reflector now. You see those shimmering highlights right there in the background? It would kind of feel like there's a car outside where the sun is going through the car window, and it's going through that car window and getting inside his home or something like that. And when it settles down, it feels natural. Whenever you can break up the light source, it's not too uniform, it's going to feel more natural, and it's going to feel like it's actually coming in from the outside. So again, that's the lighting formula that we use to create the scene for the sunrise. Just one 300 watt blue light and one 650 watt light going through a gold reflector. We're using an effect light right here, this 150 watt light, to create a wall pattern similar to window light, motivated by sunrise through the window. But we're doing it in a kind of a weird kind of way, because normally you'd expect light to come in from the left side to hit that back wall, but it's not. It wouldn't look right, and we'll show you here in just a second. The light is shining behind his head and creating that rectangular pattern on that back wall behind him. And also we put it on the same dimmer as 650, so it'll actually dim up at the exact same time as a 650 watt light, as though the sun is rising. So it has no effect on Jake's exposure. It's not hitting the actor at all. It's just hitting the background, back wall, and it's just breaking up the flatness of that back wall. Okay, so now we're going to do some calculation of wattages. So we have both lights on the same dimmer. 150 watts and 650 watts equals 800 watts, and the dimmer max is 1000 watts. So safety first, do not exceed capacities. We know for a fact that we're way underneath, actually 200 watts underneath the maximum that the dimmer can tolerate. So we can put both the 650 watt light, which is the one shimmering on the left side right there through the reflector, through the gold reflector, and the 150 watt light on the same dimmer. Now this is the other dimmer that we're using for the 150 watt light, so we can have individual control over just that one light. And this is the master dimmer that we're using to dim both of those lights together at the same time, and then dim them back up for sunrise. And there it is coming back up and all the way. Now here's Jake right there, and he's straightening out the bed. He's making sure that it's nice and clean and clear, and it's actually also very smooth, because that's going to add to that effect. And this is the effect with the bed clean and the pillows straight exactly as they're supposed to be. And it matches the cleanliness of the lighting as well, and also how far he's advanced in his life. That is, his life is being reduced in chaos a little bit. This is where it used to be. He had two different kinds of color pillows on the back there, and also there was a blanket that was a different color than the actual sheet that's on the bed. So it was very distracting. It just didn't feel right. But when you smooth it all out and you take away all that clutter, it feels more symmetrical. Now he's leaning back and forth so you can see exactly where the lights are and what's hitting him. So you'll notice that when he leans back at this point, you'll see that the shadow on the wall, that's from the 150 watt background light that's supposed to be creating a pattern on that wall. And there is the shadow from the 300 watt fill light going through the chimera. That's the one that's creating that blue light tone in the room before we put up the sunrise. And there's the 650 watt light going through the gold reflector, bouncing back and acting as his key light, and that's a shadow that it creates on the back wall as well. But when he leans forward, of course, you're not going to see the shadow from the 300 watt fill light or from the 150 watt background light. Now coming up here is Jake, or David, the actor, expressing his dissatisfaction with us and how bad of a job we're doing at the lighting, and how he just wants to walk off the set.
It's like I'm floating. That's unbelievable, dude.
Okay, so he wasn't dissatisfied, I was just kidding. And I just wanted to kind of express to you how important it is sometimes to show your actor exactly what you're going to be doing from the camera after you do the rehearsal, because it really, really boosted his confidence in us. And when he actually walked into that scene, he did such a much better job knowing exactly what the final product is going to look like on that monitor. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and dim up from behind the scenes the main light and show what it looks like when we dim it up. There it is coming up right now. That's the speed that we use pretty much for the actual shoot. And you notice his hand is just kind of drawing left and right. You can see that line that he's creating on the pad right there. because when you speed it up, and because we were actually under cranking the camera, it looked very natural when you actually shot it. We shot one normal and then we shot one undercranked. You know, always take a safety. You know, you never know what an undercrank is going to look like when you actually get to the editing studio. Now for this shot, let's talk about color harmony again. For this particular shot, we really wanted to get more color harmony, so we had him finally take off that coat that he was wearing. And notice that that particular coat right there, the purple one, when he takes it off, he's wearing that green shirt. You've got green shirt, you've got green sheets, you've got a greenish kind of wall tint in the back there. You've created a color harmony from the foreground to the midground to the background, which is what we wanted to do in this particular shot. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to create color harmony every single time you do a frame or a composition. But in this particular case, we wanted the composition and the color choices in the frame to actually help the scene to make it feel even more pleasant and peaceful. There's another scene coming up where we actually use color contrast, where we contrasted the shirt that he was wearing with the background and with the sheet that's on the bed, because that worked better for that particular scene. Now let's talk about the fact that as far as framing is concerned, you can't really see the pad in his hand right there. All we do is just ask him to raise the pad so we can actually see it. That's blocking. And it's really important for you not to ever sacrifice your frame when there's something that you can ask the actor to do that is just blocking him differently that will actually save the day. So here's another scene that we did. This is the exact same day, same lighting, same everything. We wanted to get a whole different type of scene. So there's the DP raising the tripod to get a slightly different angle on the scene, so it's not low angle looking up through the pad at him, but we want it more of a higher angle looking at him. You'll notice that the 150 light is still exactly where we left it, and the 650 is still in the same place. We're just going to use a slightly different framing and a little bit of a different decor and different wardrobe. And there's the DP actually measuring right there the distance to the camera. He's changing the diffusion that's on the Chimera and putting in a thicker diffusion, and there's a thicker diffusion coming in right now. This is going to be the full diffusion because he wanted to completely remove any trace of shadow in the background.
Okay, so earlier when he was struggling to write, as I was writing, I found surprise that something that could come out. So now am I still surprised, or is it just from brain to pen done?
Brain
without
to pen,
necessarily
brain to pen with just contentment, like you had said.
Continuous contentment.
Right, because like I said, you've arrived, essentially you've gone past the zone, you've arrived at your proper schedule. You don't have to be pushed, you don't have to
it's just
try. You don't have to try anymore.
It's water. It's a
It
flowing
just flows
water.
right out.
Right.
And now it flows in sequence too. That's the beauty. It doesn't just flow like whatever, any kind of gibberish. It actually flows in a sequence that matches
It
your
works.
thoughts, Right.
Okay, cool.
Okay, and here we are measuring the distance to the actor, and it's 6.5 feet to him lying down, 4.5 feet to when he's actually sitting up. This is from camera A, the main camera. So now let's talk about composition. He is the largest mass in the frame right there, and he's in a rectangular shape. And then there's a secondary mass right there. It's a smaller mass that repeats the larger mass's pattern. That's the shadow, of course. And there's another mass on the background, on the back wall. That's that light, the 150 watt light. And there's also that mass, which is that picture, and the other mass as well too. So what's happening is that there's his mass. Left side of the frame can support the greatest amount of screen mass, which means that when you want to put your actor someplace where he's isolated from the background, there's nothing else around him, so to speak, or draw attention to him, you put him on the left side, because for us always the left side of the frame, for some reason, can always support more weight than the right side of the frame. And we're going to go ahead and prove that to you. We're going to go ahead and flip the frame here in a second and show you exactly what it would look like if it were flipped. There it goes. You can see that there's just something wrong. The framing just feels a little off, like this is just too heavy. The right side of the frame cannot support the same mass because it challenges the path of the reading eye. It feels like the weight ought to be on the left side with more room on the right side. So we generally want the left side of the frame to bear the greatest weight and be the anchor for a harmonious frame. Now this is for harmony. If we were creating disharmony, we would put him on the right side of the frame. It would work out then. So this is take 2. And as I promised you, I'm going to give you an example of color contrast. We've been talking about color harmony before, but this is color contrast or color separation. He is being separated from the background because he's wearing that bluish colored shirt, whereas everything around him is greenish. Now, the thing is, though, it is not quite very much separated because he's still wearing a cool color. He's not wearing like a red or an orange shirt. He's still in the cool-toned family of colors. However, he's separated from the environment by use of color. These kind of concepts that I'm explaining to you, sometimes you don't really exactly know why when you get to the set you're going to make a choice like this. But if you know why, that way when you make a choice, you can evaluate it. You can say to yourself, okay, I just made this choice. I would rather him wear a red shirt. But why? Why am I doing that? And would a blue shirt work better than a red shirt? And that's when you can come back to these concepts and these principles and apply and say, well, that's complete color contrast because he's wearing a whole different hue. Why don't I just have him wear a blue shirt? That way it'll match about the same kind of cool tones as the background. It won't completely separate him from the background, but it'll still separate him slightly. He's still in the same kind of cool tone family. We haven't gone over to the warm tones of colors, but he's still separated from the background. Those are all creative choices, and hopefully we'll help you make some more of those. So let's go through some gammas and matrices right now. Okay, so this is Cine Like V fluoromatrix, Cine Like D fluoromatrix, Cine Like V normal matrix, Cine Like D normal matrix, Cine Like V cinematrix, and Cine Like D cinematrix. So we've already talked about all the differences between all the gammas. The gammas, of course, Cine Like V being the most contrasty, Cine Like D being less contrasty and more in keeping with keeping that dynamic range, so it's a little bit more grayish. And also the matrices themselves, the cinematrix being the most saturated, but also still within range of the HD medium. The fluoromatrix boosting the reds, but at the same time being more pastel-like, and the normal matrix being less saturated than either one of those last two. So we noticed that the only way we're going to be able to do the shot where he gets up into the camera is for us to flip the bed entirely to the left side so that we can place the camera right there with the tripod. Otherwise it wouldn't fit on the other side. So we flip the bed all the way around so we can get the lights in exactly the way we had them before. By that I mean not having to move the fill light. This is right here the RE150, which is acting as a key light as well as a background light. There's the light path. It's shining to the right hand side of the frame. You notice that it also has a blue gel on it. This is a full CTB color temperature blue gel that converts it to blue light. And you notice exactly where it's shining. It's shining first on Jake, creating that shadow on his right hand side. It's also creating a pattern on the back wall as well too. So it's a double duty light. It's doing two things at the same time, which you can do that. And this is with a little 150 watt light. But because of the proximity, that's the only reason why you can do it. Because it's only a few feet away from it. It's only about 4 or 5 feet away from the subject. So therefore, it can spread its light source out and do that. We're also adding an LED light, the light panel LED light. We're putting that right on top of the camera. And we're putting some diffusion on there. So we put full blue gel and also diffusion. So it's already daylight balanced blue, but we're adding even more blue to it, and we're adding diffusion to soften the highlights and soften the throw. And there's the DP right there. He's mounting it on the articulating arm, and then he's mounting that on the back of the HVX right there with the 1/4 thread. And he's going to actually lay the light panel down on the sun hood. So now this is a shot without the light panel. We're doing the shot without the light panel, and now we're going to show you with the light panel right there. You see that cool blue tone that it puts into his eyes and also into his face. It creates new highlights in his eyes as well too, and we're going to take it away here in just a second. This is without. So you can see it's a nice pleasant frame, it's fine, but we weren't going for that. We were going for more of a creative type of lighting arrangement. So that's what we have to go through, and essentially to get that kind of lighting situation. So there's the LED light right there, and it's dimming up and down, and you can see the shadow on the back wall from the 150 as well too. And there's Jake, and we're dimming it up and down on his face, so you can see exactly what the light panel is doing at that point. There it is, dimming up and down through the A camera. And there's the shot now. This is with the light panel. Of course, we overshot it. There's not enough headroom. And of course, that's one of the blocking issues that you have to work out with your actor as well too, is that headroom. You can't have the actor's eyes that close to the top of the frame. It just doesn't feel right. So you work it out with your actor, and the next time he does it, you just tell him to angle his head down just a little bit, or you tilt up with the camera to compensate a little bit if the frame will allow you, so you can get that proper headroom. In this case, we couldn't work it out with the actor. He has an arc of his body. That's the only way he can come up, so we had to tilt up to compensate for him. That's the only way he can do it. So here he is coming up, and he bounced back a little bit, and that's the shot that we wanted. Now let's also look at that shine on the left side of his face right there. A little bit of a shine right there, so we added a little bit of powder to it, and we're going to show you what a little bit of powder is going to do to take away that shine. Here it is coming up again. Right there. A little bit more powder, and the highlight is still there, which we need it to be there because it doesn't feel right without it, but when you put the highlight back in at full intensity, it's just so glaring. So you don't want to have too much powder and then it feels like the face has been powdered. You just want to have a little bit to kind of blunt that light a little bit, to dull that surface a little bit more so it doesn't reflect it in such an intense way. So this is going to be the fill light. This is the fill light coming on and off. You'll notice it from the last setup. It's the exact same thing. Let's see what it's doing to Jake. There's the fill light coming on. That is the actual fill light. You notice that it makes a very, very soft shadow back there, and it's pretty dim. That's really important because we don't want to overpower the key light in this particular circumstance. The key light's going to come in from the left side, that's the 150 RE. This is what the key light does just by itself. You notice how it lights its side lights coming in from the left side of the frame. It's lighting him and the background as well too. So this is going to be key plus fill light. This is the key light and the fill light in combination. You'll notice that there's the highlights on the left side of his face, on the back wall, but at the same time the fill light is on, filling in all the shadows. Now let's look at the last light that we're using. This is going to be the LED light panel light. It's acting as a catch light and the fill light combination at the same time. It's making catch lights in the eyes. This is its standard preset tungsten 3200 degrees Kelvin white balance, and this is key plus fill plus white panel. And this is going to be key plus light panel only. You notice the different tone there. This is just the key light. Extremely contrasty, heavy shadows. This is going to be just the light panel by itself. And this is key plus fill plus light panel again, and you can achieve at least 4 dramatically different moods by varying the key, fill, light panel combinations. So when you have your basic 3-point lighting setup, or even a 2-point lighting setup with an effect light like the light panel in this situation, you can get 4 entirely different moods. This is just by varying the lights being turned on and off. We're not even talking about the ratios of the lights to each other or the tones of the different lights to each other. This is just 3 lights in one room with one person. You can get at least 4 dramatically different moods. And actually you can probably get a lot more if you use different color gels in there, but here are the 4 that we achieved just by varying, you know, some lights being on and some lights being off, not even varying the ratios or the colors of each light. Now let's go ahead and see what's going to happen when we just reposition the light panel. We're going to keep the key and the fill in the exact same position, but we're just going to take the light panel up a little bit higher so it creates a little bit more of a shadow underneath his eye sockets. We call it kind of the Godfather light, you know, and of course that's why, you know, David in this particular circumstance is making the whole chin thing and the jaw thing, and he's making the Godfather voice. But so notice how we pushed the light panel up higher and further forward so that it creates that shadow underneath his light sockets, because it's going to come from almost directly above his face. So let's go ahead and actually see what kind of an effect it had once we turn it on. Look at that. You see that effect? That's a dramatically different effect from when it was just sitting right on top of the lens. So we're also replacing the full blue with half blue, so it's not quite as blue as it used to be before. It's just going to be more blue tone, but it's not going to be quite as blue tone as it was before. So here's the new setup. You notice the shadows underneath his eye sockets. This is from the light being in his current position, right above his head, pretty much creating that Godfather type of light. Here's the one where the light was sitting right above the actual lens on the lens hood, and you notice how it fills in all the shadows actually in his face, and this is with full blue now. So here's the final frame. That's what we went with. So now we're going to remove the filter. This is the B+W clear filter, actually clear UV filter, and we're going to add a Century 0.6 wide angle adapter. This is not a converter. You can't zoom through it. This is just an adapter, but it gives you a lot more angle of view. And it's going to go ahead and give you 40% actually more view. So this is with the Century 0.6 wide lens. And we're going to go ahead and also show you what it looked like without it, but you can see just how much more information you're capturing in the frame from the exact same location. So this is Century 0.6 wide angle lens, and you notice also that there's a little bit of barrel distortion there, where any kind of a vertical line towards the edge of the frame is going to start to bow a little bit. That's perfectly natural. Any one of these lenses will do that. Any kind of an adapter lens or a converter lens, it's a wide angle. After it goes beyond about 25%, it's going to have that barrel distortion. So it's just a natural part of using this adapter. So here's the standard fixed lens again. This is the lens, just a wide angle lens built into the camera by itself, and that's what we're seeing. Notice that also the lines, the vertical lines have gone back to being straight up and down, but you see a lot less of the frame from that same perspective. Here it is again with a 0.6. So that's what you're getting with a 40% wider angle of view using a Century 0.6 wide angle lens. And again, the barrel distortion, those vertical lines being distorted like that, is perfectly natural part of using these adapters. So this is a scene where he finds his routine. He starts waking up at a certain time every single day. So this is going to be the 150 light, 150 tungsten RE light, and we're going to be putting that over to the left side of the frame, and that's going to be lighting the background. Notice we also have CTB on it as well. This is full CTB, color temperature blue, and that's a cheese plate right there that it's sitting on right there. A cheese plate is just a modified plate with holes in it that you can attach certain devices to, and the device right on top of it there is a knuckle. It's bolted directly to it, and then there's a rod that extends up into the light, and that rod is what the light is bolted onto. It makes it a little bit of a nice little table stand, and that's just something that the DP has fabricated himself. And that's going to be positioned right there on the left-hand side of the desk to act as a background light, make it feel like there's moonlight coming in or a street light coming in from the window. Now he's actually cutting some opal diffusion. Opal diffusion is what he calls diet diffusion because it's a very thin light material. So he's attaching another 150 watt RE light right there on a stand. He's putting a mini Cardellini on it, which is that device right there. And that clamp is going to allow him to bolt a boom to that particular light stand and attach a flag directly to the light stand without the use of another stand. You see how he made a little bit of an edge to it right there? So what that edge allowed him to do is to just flag the light only off of the lamp, but maintain the exact same amount of light on Jake. And so when we turn on that light, it'll feel like that lamp has been turned on and is actually creating that light on Jake's face. So this is going to be the key light. His key light, because it's the closest one to him, that's also the brightest. We're turning it on and off. Here it is off. And here comes the fill light, on and off. Look at the shadow density on his face. That's what you want to look at whenever you turn on the fill light, on and off. You can see that? Pretty much the shadows are getting really dark when you don't use that fill light. So this is going to be the practical light, on and off. This is just a practical lamp, which is supposed to be lighting his face, but of course isn't really. What it's just lighting is that area right in front of it on the desk. This is going to be the background light, on and off. So you can see what the background light's doing just behind him on the background. You can see that it affects Jake just a little bit, but it's not enough to create a new shadow or do anything. All it's doing is lighting the background behind him, and it's making it more convincing. It feels like there's a street light outside, and that's creating that light when it's actually on. This is just a practical, so we can show you what it would look like if it was just that table lamp lighting him with none of our lights on. This is 12 decibels gain with a 40 watt bulb in the desk lamp. So if you go to 12 decibels gain, if you arrive on the set, you don't want to do any lighting, at 12 decibels gain, this is what your shot's going to look like. Burned out highlights and a lot of grain. This is just a background light. So this is background light plus fill. This is just fill light. We wanted to bring up that glass so you can see it in the darkness a little bit more and bring attention to the fact that you have to have some water when you go to do your writing when we were shooting the movie. Watch where that position is. It's right behind the glass now, so it really brings up the liquid inside that glass. So it feels more like moonlight is coming in and actually really hitting that glass. You can see it really has a rim now. It is very much separated, and it's also lighting that pad inadvertently too and making the pad come out. So let's actually take a look at it one time. And this, of course, as with anything, when you do something for the first time, sometimes it doesn't quite work out. This first light gag didn't quite work out because the light switch kept flickering the lights, so it didn't feel natural. It felt like there was an electrical brownout every time he would turn on the lights. Now when he turns on the light, it flickered a little bit. And that flickering, of course, was because the switch was malfunctioning when we were turning it on. So you have to notice those things, because if you kind of blink, you won't really notice. So here's take two, and he turns on the light and everything's fine. So we fixed the switch. Now another thing we want to talk about is when he gets up, you notice that highlight up in the window. That highlight up in the window is being created by our fill light, and it is not very convincing. It's not something that would normally be there. I mean, it could have been like a closet light or something like that, but to us it was a little bit distracting. It took away from the frame, took away from the darkness of the frame. So the DP grabbed a Matthews flag and he put it behind that screen in front of the window. You could have also done this with Duvetine or with a black trash bag, pretty much any kind of a black material that can go back there, preferably Duvetine though than a black trash bag, because the black trash bag is going to be more reflective. It should be a non-reflective material. And now look at the frame. There's nothing in there now that's distracting you from Jake. It feels a little bit more natural to us. Whenever you can cut on motion, as you are right now, watch this, when he sits into the frame, now you can cut from the medium shot to the close-up on motion, which will mask small differences, for instance, in the way that he had the blanket on his shoulders, in his appearance, in his hair. You're not concentrating so much on it if you can cut on the actual motion of him sitting down rather than just cutting directly from medium shot to the close-up after he's already sat down. So try to always have him sit into the frame. What we're going to talk about here is lighting direction. How to motivate your light from the proper direction, but not just from the proper direction, but along the exact direction to mimic a practical light. Study the scene right here. We're going ahead and adjusting the exposure, and we're adjusting the positioning of our 150 watt little RE tungsten light that's sitting right in front of the subject on the left hand side in front of that computer, and it's drawing a line from the practical lamp over his head and to the back wall to make that shadow consistent as though he were being lit by that practical lamp right there on the left hand side. Now that's really, really important, because the light, the actual lampshade right there is opaque, so it wouldn't be lighting Jake from the lampshade itself on the left-hand side. So we're going to go ahead and move that up. And when we move our key light up, it's going to make the shadow behind his head go downwards. And watch how that doesn't draw that line anymore. It doesn't feel like that practical lamp is drawing a line directly across over his head into the back wall anymore. There's too much of a gap there. So it doesn't feel convincing. It feels like the light is going up and then down again. So when we go ahead and lower our light again a little bit more to make it match that practical lamp, it raises the shadow back behind him again so it feels convincing again. So when you're doing motivated lighting, essentially, where you're motivating all of your lighting directly from a practical lamp, not only do you have to match the general direction, but almost the exact direction in circumstances like this. Now let's talk about blocking a little bit. Let's watch Jake walk into the shot. He's going to be coming in from screen right. See how he's sidestepping the camera? It doesn't feel natural. We did several takes of this. We actually did 4 takes, and every single time we tried to work with him on trying to get his body to rotate and walk straight forward so that it feels natural. And it took us quite a few times, but it was really difficult because there's really not much room in there between the camera and the bed right there behind him. It's only about a foot. But when he sidesteps the camera like that, it clues in the audience that there is actually a camera right there, and it takes them out of that suspended disbelief that they're actually watching, events in some other world, and then they remember that they're actually just watching a movie at that point. So watch that. See, when he walks in naturally and then turns around, that feels right. Now let's talk about composition. When we freeze frame this shot right here, we notice that he's along the left-hand side line of thirds, facing towards the right, that his eyes are actually in the top third of the frame and towards the left, so it's very well balanced. And also he's making a triangular shape with his body, from his face down to his shoulders and down to his elbow, especially along that background frame. Now the background is actually what's really important. When we make him disappear, we look at the background, it's actually a cube because of the way that the walls are painted. The right side wall is going to look a little bit light. The top side wall, which is the ceiling, is going to look a little bit darker. So once again, that's the light side, and that's the darker side, and that looks like the shaded side. You can look at it as a cube, either facing towards you or away from you. It's like a play. It's a play on your visual perception. So it was really nice, and that's why we picked that as a background, and that's why we framed the shot from such a low angle and looking up at Jake in this particular position. Okay, notice how we move the camera now much closer to Jake and over his left shoulder. What we're doing is we're getting an over-the-shoulder shot of the materials, all the scripts that he's taking out and laying down on the table. So again, we stayed on his left shoulder in reality, like his real left shoulder, which is his right shoulder to us, because we're still maintaining the same eye line. And while we were up there, we also grabbed another shot for a whole different scene. That's how you conserve time when you're actually on the set. You pretty much park the camera in one location, get as many shots as you can for that location, for that lighting, even if you have to have your actors changing wardrobe, but try to conserve the amount of time that you've done for lighting and also for parking the camera there. This is the one where he wakes up in the middle of the night, and he kind of wakes up into the camera almost, and then he looks over to the desk and he sees the writing pad lit by the moonlight. So what we did here is we did kind of like a fake dolly, where as you can see the DP, I asked him to position the camera so he can swing it forward and back. He can kind of like push the camera front and back, forward and back on the actual tripod. He's just rocking it back and forth. And all I want is just this little bit of motion, just about 6 or 7 inches of motion right there, and getting closer to the pad. Also, I want you to look at the lighting on this pad right now. See how it's kind of flat? All it's being lit by is the fill light right now, and the light panel that we were using before is kind of in the wrong position. Whenever you're seeing even a pad on a desk, it's not just that. It has a foreground, a midground, and a background. And it has in several different directions as well too. You can look at it as the pad being the foreground and the desk lamp or the table lamp being in the background, but you can also look at it from this angle right here when you get to this particular position as the pencil being in the foreground, the pad being in the midground, and the desk being in the background. So there's the backlight. That's that 150 watt RE tungsten backlight, and it actually is going through the CTB full color temperature blue, full blue gel, and there it is being turned on and off for you. And now you're going to see the key light, which is in this case the light panel. It's the closest, brightest light to the actual object, which our object of interest in this case is the pencil and the pad. And you can see that coming on and off like that. And there's the fill light coming on and off. See the shadows coming in and out? That's what it's affecting, the shadows in front of the pencil, in front of the pad. And see how the DP is using that good old piece of cardboard again, and he's kind of moving it into the shot right there. And essentially what he's doing with it is he's flagging the top left-hand corner of the writing pad, because it was kind of taking away attention from the actual center of the frame. This is one of those cool shots that the DP wanted to do, and I told him that if we had time at the end of the day, I'd be happy to do it, and we did. So he did. He suspended the camera up there, and it's going to give me an excellent opportunity to talk to you again about lighting direction, which has been kind of the theme of the evening here. See where I'm putting the 300 watt light right there going through the Chimera from the right side of the frame. It's actually hitting Jake from the right side of the frame when we actually switch to where the A camera is. There's A camera, and the light's coming from the right-hand side of the frame, and it's causing the shadow to be behind Jake on the left-hand side. Let's examine that. There comes the light from the right-hand side, and you can see how it's throwing that shadow on the left-hand side of Jake behind him on the back wall, that green wall. So it's not in keeping with the light that's coming from the ceiling fan. The ceiling fan light's supposed to be coming from up above to the left-hand side, so the shadow technically is supposed to be on the right-hand side of Jake, because we never established anything else in the room as causing any kind of light, as creating light. So this shadow right here is going to be wrong, and it needs to move over to the right-hand side, unless we had established something other, another light source in the room that would create that kind of light, but we never did. So we moved the 300 watt over to the left-hand side of the frame. We added a flag right there, and the reason that flag is there to keep the light from hitting the back wall and to keep it concentrated only on Jake, so he's always brighter than the back wall. So there's the light coming from frame left, and it's hitting Jake from frame left again, which means it's creating a shadow on the right-hand side instead of the left-hand side. You have to be able to draw a line from the light over his head to the back wall, and that has to be a straight line without any kind of jagged curves. It can't go over his head and then back down again. So that feels fake because the light is coming from the right side, and that feels right because the light is coming from the left side, because we never established any kind of light source being in the room from the right-hand side of the frame.